The cruel invitation. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing the marble and glass expanse of Montgomery Enterprises' executive floor. The space smelled faintly of polished wood and expensive cologne, a silent declaration of power that seemed to vibrate in the very air. At the far end of the hallway, past towering glass walls and golden nameplates, was the corner office of Ethan Montgomery, the man whose signature could shake stock markets, ruin competitors, and change lives overnight. He was 36 years old, the kind of man newspapers loved to call self-made, though in truth his empire was built on inherited money sharpened by ruthless ambition. To the public he was dazzling, a billionaire playboy whose blue-gray eyes graced magazine covers, his tuxedo-clad frame photographed beside supermodels and film stars. But to those who worked under him, he was something else entirely, cold, calculating, and merciless. At a desk tucked discreetly into the corner of the executive floor sat Clara Hayes, 28 years old, quiet and perpetually hidden behind square glasses. She had spent the past 3 years as Ethan Montgomery's personal assistant. If Ethan was a storm, Clara was the steady lighthouse that kept things from crashing. She managed his impossible schedule, his endless meetings, and his chaotic demands with a calm efficiency that even his board admired. Yet despite her dedication, Ethan rarely looked at her. To him, she was part of the furniture, useful, dependable, invisible. She was the woman who arrived before dawn and left long after sunset, who wore the same modest skirts and beige cardigans, who ate her lunch at her desk while balancing 3 phones and a laptop. No one in the office knew much about her life outside work, except that she lived somewhere in Queens and never attended company parties. The truth was that Clara's world extended far beyond the glossy glass walls of Montgomery Enterprises. Her widowed mother struggled with chronic illness, and her younger brother, Michael, had just started college on a partial scholarship that still left hefty tuition bills. Clara's salary was their lifeline, the only thing standing between her family and ruin. She couldn't afford mistakes. She couldn't afford pride. And she certainly couldn't afford to offend Ethan Montgomery, no matter how ruthless or dismissive he was. Every day she told herself to endure, to push through his cold indifference because walking away was not an option. That particular Thursday morning began like so many others. Clara sat at her desk, typing notes from Ethan's latest conference call, her fingers moving with the speed of someone who had long ago stopped needing to think about the motions. She adjusted her glasses and reached for her coffee, only to pause as the deep, commanding voice of her boss cut through the silence. "Miss Hayes," Ethan called from inside his office, not bothering to look up from his laptop. "Cancel my dinner with Senator Blake tomorrow evening. I'll be attending the Children's Health Foundation gala instead." Clara quickly scrolled through his digital calendar, her pen poised above her notepad. "Yes, Mr. Montgomery. Should I arrange for your usual companion service to provide an escort for the gala?" Her tone was professional, cautious, the way one speaks to a lion that might bite without warning. For a moment, Ethan didn't answer. Then, with the slow, deliberate precision of someone savoring an idea, he leaned back in his leather chair and fixed his gaze on Clara. His lips curved into a smile she had seen before, and one that never meant anything good. It was the smile of a man plotting not just a deal but a spectacle. "Actually, Miss Hayes," he said smoothly, his voice laced with mock enthusiasm, "I have a better idea. You will accompany me to the gala." The word struck her like a physical blow. Clara froze, her pen hovering above the paper. Surely she had misheard. Ethan Montgomery didn't take assistants to charity galas. He was always photographed with women who graced the covers of fashion magazines, women with diamonds at their throats, couture gowns hugging their silhouettes, smiles trained for the cameras. She and her budget-friendly cardigan and scuffed flats did not belong in that world. "Sir," she said carefully, her voice low, "I don't think I would be appropriate for such an event. Perhaps I could contact—" "Nonsense," Ethan interrupted, rising from his chair with that same thin smile playing on his lips. He walked around his desk and stood before her, his towering frame radiating authority. His eyes, sharp and calculating, swept over her outfit with obvious disdain. "You know my schedule better than anyone. You understand my business interests. You're the obvious choice for such an important networking opportunity." Clara's heart sank. His words sounded flattering on the surface, but she wasn't naive. She had overheard enough of his conversations with his friends to recognize cruelty dressed as charm. This wasn't about networking. This was about amusement. Ethan wanted a spectacle, a plain, ordinary assistant standing beside him among glittering elites, someone for his friends to smirk at, for society pages to whisper about. She would be a prop in his endless performance of power. She faltered, clutching her notepad tighter. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to say she had a prior engagement, to make some excuse. But then she thought of her mother's medicine bills waiting on the kitchen counter, of Michael's tuition payment due in just 2 weeks. This job was their survival, and Ethan Montgomery was not a man who accepted refusal. The gala begins at 8, Ethan continued, his tone leaving no room for argument. Cocktails at 7. Formal attire, of course. I'll arrange transportation. Text me your address. He leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough for only her to hear. And, Miss Hayes? Don't embarrass me. Then, as if the matter were settled, he returned to his desk and resumed typing, dismissing her from his mind entirely. Clara walked back to her small workstation on unsteady legs, her pulse pounding in her ears. She stared blankly at her computer screen, the neat rows of data blurring together. She could already picture it, the opulent ballroom glittering with chandeliers, women draped in gowns worth more than her yearly salary, men in tailored tuxedos sipping champagne and trading million-dollar deals. And she, awkward and out of place, dragged into the spotlight for Ethan's amusement. Her phone buzzed against the desk. It was a message from her best friend, Lena Alvarez, a fiery-spirited woman who worked as a junior fashion designer in Soho. Coffee later? You sounded weird when you called last night. Clara's throat tightened. She typed back quickly. Yes, need your help with something big. About that event I mentioned. I'll explain everything after work. By the time the clock struck 6 and Clara finally left the office, her nerves were frayed, her chest heavy with dread. But beneath the anxiety, a spark of defiance flickered. If Ethan Montgomery thought he could use her as a pawn in his cruel game, perhaps it was time to remind him, and herself, that pawns could surprise kings. The transformation. The streets of Soho glimmered with neon reflections that evening as Clara hurried toward her best friend Lena's apartment. It had been a draining day, every hour filled with the weight of Ethan Montgomery's smirk and the cruel certainty that he had set a trap for her. By the time she arrived at Lena's loft, her shoulders ached from tension, and the nervous twisting in her stomach had become unbearable. The loft, in contrast to Clara's anxiety, was a world alive with creativity. Rolls of fabric leaned against the walls, sketches of evening gowns were scattered across the coffee table, and a half-finished dress stood proudly on a mannequin by the window. The air smelled faintly of lavender candles and fresh coffee. As soon as Lena opened the door and saw Clara's face, she ushered her inside with the urgency of a sister preparing for battle. All right, Hayes, Lena said, handing Clara a mug of tea and steering her toward the couch. Tell me everything, and don't even think about downplaying it. Clara set the mug on the table, her hands trembling slightly. She took a deep breath and explained what had happened. The gala invitation, the way Ethan had looked at her as if she were an amusing experiment, the unspoken cruelty behind his words. By the time she finished, Lena's dark eyes were flashing with outrage, her hands clenched at her hips. That pompous, arrogant... Lena stopped herself, exhaling sharply. He thinks he's going to make you the punchline at some glittering dinner? He has no idea who he's dealing with. Clara shook her head miserably. Lena, I can't quit. You know what's at stake. Mom's medication, Michael's tuition. If I lose this job, everything falls apart. Her voice cracked and she pressed her palms against her knees to steady herself. I have to go even if it's humiliating. I just need to get through it somehow. But Lena was already pacing the room with the energy of someone plotting a revolution. No, Clara, you're not just going to survive it. You're going to walk into that gala looking like you were born to be there. You're going to stand beside Ethan Montgomery, and for the first time in his smug little life, he's going to realize he underestimated someone. He's going to choke on his arrogance when he sees you. Clara gave a weak laugh, half disbelief, half nerves. Lena, look at me. I'm not the type of woman who belongs at a gala. I don't know the first thing about fashion or elegance. You don't need to, Lena replied firmly, planting herself in front of Clara. That's my job. You've been hiding behind those cardigans and glasses for years, but I know you. You're strong, intelligent, and beautiful. All we need to do is let the world see it. The conviction in Lena's voice lit something inside Clara, a small, fragile flame of possibility. For years she had avoided mirrors, afraid of seeing only tired eyes and unremarkable features. She had built her life around practicality, never luxury, always focused on survival. But sitting here with Lena's fierce determination blazing like a shield, Clara began to wonder if perhaps she could be more than Ethan Montgomery's invisible assistant. And so, for the next several hours, Lena set to work with the precision of an artist preparing her masterpiece. She began with Clara's auburn hair, washing and conditioning it with products that smelled of honey and jasmine, transforming the dull strands into waves that shimmered with vitality. "Your hair has been begging for freedom," Lena explained, carefully curling sections that fell gracefully around Clara's shoulders. "You've hidden it away in that severe bun for too long. Tonight, it's going to tell the world that you're more than what they expect." While the rollers set, Lena moved to Clara's face, applying a gentle exfoliant and a nourishing mask that left her skin glowing. Then came the makeup, not the heavy, theatrical kind that hid flaws, but a careful enhancement that celebrated Clara's natural beauty. A touch of foundation to even her skin, a hint of blush to warm her cheeks, eyeliner that made her amber eyes shine like molten gold, and a subtle shade of rose for her lips. As Lena worked, she spoke in soft, reassuring tones, reminding Clara of her worth, her resilience, and her quiet strength. When Lena finally handed her the mirror, Clara's breath caught in her throat. The woman staring back at her was still herself, but elevated, radiant, confident, almost regal. Her eyes looked larger, brighter, filled with a spark she hadn't seen in years. Her lips curved with a softness that spoke of grace rather than exhaustion. It was as if Lena had peeled away years of self-doubt and revealed the version of Clara she had buried beneath obligation and fear. But the transformation was not yet complete. Lena disappeared into her bedroom and returned carrying a garment bag with a triumphant smile. "I've been saving this for the right moment," she said, unzipping it to reveal a gown that took Clara's breath away. The dress was a masterpiece, deep emerald silk that seemed to shimmer like liquid under the light, its lines both elegant and bold. The bodice hugged just enough to suggest confidence without immodesty, while the skirt flowed with a grace that promised to glide across marble floors. Clara's immediate reaction was panic. "Lena, I can't wear that!" "It's far too expensive. What if I ruin it? What if I trip? I'll look ridiculous trying to play dress-up in something like that." "You're going to wear it," Lena insisted gently but firmly, placing the gown in Clara's hands. "Because you deserve to know what it feels like to walk into a room and hold your head high. This isn't about him, Clara, this is about you. You've spent years shrinking yourself to survive. Now it's time to take up space." As Clara slipped into the gown, she felt as though she were stepping into another life, the fabric draped perfectly as if tailored for her alone. When she turned toward the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. The shy assistant in thrift store clothes had vanished. In her place stood a woman who belonged on the cover of a magazine, a woman who carried herself with elegance and quiet authority. For the first time in years, Clara straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. And as she gazed at her reflection, she realized something profound. The true transformation wasn't the dress or the makeup, it was the way she felt inside. For once, she wasn't ashamed or invisible or small. For once, she saw herself as someone worthy of being noticed. Lena clapped her hands with delight. "Perfect. Tomorrow night, when you walk into that ballroom, no one will see Ethan Montgomery's assistant. They'll see Clara Hayes, a woman who commands respect. And when he tries to use you as a joke, the only person who will look like a fool is him." Clara laughed softly, nerves still fluttering in her chest but tempered now with courage. The road ahead still terrified her, the glittering gala, the sharp eyes of high society, the cruel amusement she expected in Ethan's smile. But she would not go as a victim. She would go as herself, fully seen for the first time. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the emerald gown carefully hung by her closet, Clara whispered a quiet prayer. She prayed for strength, for dignity, for the courage to face whatever awaited her. And as sleep finally claimed her, one thought lingered in her mind. Ethan Montgomery had invited her to be humiliated. Instead, he was about to witness something he could never have predicted. The past, that refused to stay. Buried life slowly began to feel balanced for Aisha and Hamza, But beneath the calm surface lay unresolved emotions and secrets that refused to remain hidden. Aisha had built a new life for herself with dignity and courage, yet the scars of her past had not fully healed. She tried her best to focus on her daughter's happiness, to keep her days busy with work, studies, and building a hopeful future. But deep down, her heart still carried the weight of betrayal and the unanswered question, why had the man she once loved so deeply abandoned her when she needed him the most? That unanswered question gnawed at her during quiet nights when she tucked her daughter into bed and stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Hamza, on the other hand, was learning new lessons about patience, empathy, and resilience. Every evening when he came home, tired yet satisfied from work, he saw Aisha and her daughter waiting for him, their laughter filling the house. It gave him a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. Yet Hamza also noticed the shadows in Aisha's eyes, the moments when she would grow distant as if her mind had drifted into memories she did not want to revisit. He wanted to ask her about her past, to offer her the space to unburden herself, but he respected her silence and chose to wait until she was ready. One chilly winter morning, Aisha was walking her daughter to school when she suddenly froze in her steps. Across the street, standing near a busy cafe, she saw a man who made her heart pound violently in her chest. He looked older, his face carrying the lines of time, but his presence was unmistakable. It was Adil, the very man who had once promised her forever, but had left her abandoned, pregnant, and broken. Their eyes met for a fleeting second, and Aisha quickly turned away, gripping her daughter's hand tighter, her breath shallow as if she had just been struck. She hurried off, pretending not to notice him, but her heart raced with confusion, anger, and pain. That night, Aisha could not hide her turmoil. She sat in her room long after her daughter had fallen asleep, staring at the faint reflection of her face in the window pane. The memories she had tried so hard to bury came crashing back, the promises whispered under the stars, the laughter they once shared, and the cruel silence that followed when he walked away, leaving her to face life alone. She remembered the fear of her first pregnancy checkup without support, the judgmental stares from people, the loneliness of giving birth without the comfort of the father of her child. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she quickly wiped them away, determined not to let her daughter see her pain. Hamza noticed her distress and finally asked her gently, "Aisha, are you okay? You've been so quiet since morning." She hesitated, her lips trembling as she tried to find the right words. For years she had locked this pain inside, refusing to give it power over her. But now she felt the need to share it with someone who had earned her trust. Slowly, with pauses in between, she told Hamza everything. The story of her first love, the betrayal, the nights of crying alone, and the strength it took to build herself up from the ashes. Hamza listened without interrupting, his eyes filled with empathy, his heart aching for the suffering she had endured. When she finished, there was silence between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Hamza finally spoke, his voice firm yet tender. "Aisha, you went through hell and survived. That makes you stronger than most people I know. And as for him, if fate ever brings him back into your life, remember this. You owe him nothing. Not your tears, not your explanations, not even your anger. The life you built, the child you raised, the dignity you carry, it all belongs to you and no one can take that away." His words wrapped around her heart like a warm blanket on a cold night. For the first time, she felt the burden of her past slightly lift, as if sharing it had loosened the chains that had held her down for years. Yet deep within, she knew this was not the end. Seeing Adil again was no coincidence. Life had a way of circling back, forcing old wounds open before true healing could happen. Days later, Aisha's intuition proved right. Adil appeared again, this time standing outside the school gates, waiting until her daughter came running out. His eyes followed the child with an expression that was unreadable. Was it regret, longing, or guilt? Aisha's heart nearly stopped as she realized he had seen the little girl and perhaps already guessed the truth. Fear surged through her veins, but alongside it came something else. Anger, sharp and hot, reminding her of the strength she had gained from surviving without him. She held her daughter close and walked away without a word. But inside she knew a confrontation was inevitable. That evening she told Hamza what had happened, her voice shaking but determined. Hamza listened silently, his jaw tightening. He did not need to ask who the man was, he already knew. After a long pause, he said, If he comes near you or your daughter again, you won't face him alone. I'll stand with you, Aisha, no matter what. His words, filled with quiet strength, gave her a sense of safety she had never felt before. Yet, as much as Aisha wanted to close this chapter forever, life had other plans. The past had returned uninvited, and now hovered at the edges of her carefully built future. The man who had broken her once was back, and this time, she would have to decide whether to confront him, forgive him, or banish him from her life once and for all. The storm of confrontation. The days that followed were like walking on a trembling bridge for Aisha. Her heart was unsettled, her mind heavy with thoughts she could not escape. She had spent years stitching her life together, creating stability for her daughter and building trust with Hamza, who had never once let her feel alone. Yet now the reappearance of Adil threatened to undo everything, like an old wound reopening and bleeding despite the years of healing. Every time she saw her daughter smile or heard her innocent laughter, she felt both immense pride and overwhelming fear, because she knew Adil's presence was not a fleeting coincidence. He was watching, perhaps calculating, and sooner or later he would approach directly. A week later, the inevitable happened. Aisha was leaving the school after a parents' meeting when she found Adil waiting by the gate. His eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her chest tighten, but she refused to let him see her fear. She lifted her chin, held her daughter's hand firmly, and walked past him. But his voice followed her, low and urgent. "Aisha, please. I need to talk to you." She froze for a moment, her body trembling. But then, without turning back, she said coldly, "There's nothing left to say." Her daughter looked up at her curiously, sensing tension, but Aisha smiled at her, hiding the storm that raged within. That night, when Hamza returned from work, Aisha finally told him what had happened. She did not break down, did not cry, she was past that, but her voice carried the weight of years of unspoken pain. Hamza listened in silence, his eyes narrowing in quiet anger, not at Aisha but at the man who had caused her so much suffering. After a long pause, he said, "He's not going to stop until you confront him. Running away will only give him power over your peace. This time, Aisha, you have to face him, and I'll be right there with you." His words struck her heart like a steady drumbeat of courage. She realized he was right. Avoiding Adil would not protect her or her daughter forever. If she wanted true closure, she would have to look him in the eye and make her truth clear. The next day, she agreed to meet Adil in a cafe, but only after ensuring Hamza would be nearby, ready if she needed him. Sitting across from Adil after all those years felt surreal. He looked older, more tired, as though life had not been kind to him. But for Aisha, there was no sympathy left. She had carried too much pain, too much betrayal to allow herself to soften. Adil began with words she had once longed to hear: apologies, regrets, explanations of youthful mistakes. He spoke of fear, of immaturity, of being pressured by family who had never approved of her. He admitted he had been a coward and that leaving her was the biggest regret of his life. His voice cracked when he said, "When I saw her, our daughter, I knew what I had lost. I knew I had been blind." Aisha listened without interrupting, her face calm but her heart a storm. When he finished, she leaned forward, her voice steady and cutting through the air like a blade. "You left me when I was carrying your child. You left me to face shame, judgment, loneliness. You left me to wipe my own tears when I gave birth. To fight every battle alone, to raise a daughter without a father. Do you have any idea what that means? Regret now cannot erase years of silence." Her words made Adil lower his head, his hands trembling as they clutched the coffee cup. But Aisha was not finished. "You may be her biological father, but you are not her parent. Parenting is not in words or blood. It is in presence, sacrifice, and love. And she already has someone who gives her that, without asking for anything in return." Adil's eyes flickered with pain and then with desperation. "I want to be part of her life now," he said quietly. "I want a chance to make things right." Those words sent a chill down Aisha's spine. She realized the danger. He was not only a ghost from her past, but someone who might try to disrupt her daughter's peace. Her lips pressed into a firm line as she stood up, leaving her coffee untouched. "You had your chance, Adil. You gave it up the day you walked away. My daughter doesn't need confusion or broken promises. Stay away from her." Without another glance, she walked out, her steps firm, her heart pounding with both fear and relief. Hamza was waiting outside, leaning against his car, his eyes immediately searching her face for signs of distress. She walked straight to him, and though she tried to stay composed, the moment she saw his steady gaze, her walls cracked. She whispered, "It's over, but I'm scared he won't leave us alone." Hamza put a reassuring hand on her shoulder and said, "Then he'll learn what it means to stand against someone who protects his family." From that day, Aisha felt an invisible battle begin. Adil's presence loomed around them. Sometimes she saw him at a distance, other times she sensed his attempts to reach her through mutual acquaintances. But unlike the young, vulnerable girl she once was, Aisha was no longer alone. She had Hamza's unwavering support, and together they stood like a shield around her daughter. But deep inside, Aisha also knew this storm had not passed. Adil was not the kind of man to disappear quietly, and though she had confronted him, the real test of her strength and the strength of her bond with Hamza was yet to come. Choosing the future, burying the past. The days after Aisha's confrontation with Adil stretched into weeks, yet the shadow of his presence lingered like a storm cloud refusing to pass. At first she thought her words had been enough, that he would retreat into the silence where he had lived for years. But soon she realized that Adil's regret was not simple. It had transformed into an obsession, a desperate attempt to reclaim what he had lost. He began sending messages through old acquaintances, pleading for another meeting. Once he even left a letter at the school folded neatly into her daughter's bag, which left Aisha trembling with fear and fury. She destroyed the letter before her daughter could read it, but she knew that ignoring him was no longer an option. Aisha had built her life on resilience, yet this battle felt different. This was not about her pride, her heartbreak, or even her anger. It was about her daughter's safety, her daughter's peace. Every night she sat by the bedside, watching her child sleep, and promised herself silently that no ghost from the past would ever shatter the innocence of that smile. Hamza noticed the tension growing heavier in her eyes and finally said one evening, "Aisha, I know you want to protect her on your own, but you don't have to carry this weight alone anymore. This isn't just your fight. It's mine too." Those words touched her deeply because they weren't spoken as mere support. They were a declaration of responsibility, of partnership, of love. The breaking point came on a rainy afternoon when Adil showed up at Aisha's workplace. He waited outside until she stepped out, his clothes drenched, his face pale, but his determination burning. "Aisha, I need to see her," he said with desperation blocking her path. "I have a right. She's my blood." The coldness in Aisha's eyes shocked him. She had once been gentle, trusting, and soft-hearted, but now she stood before him as a woman who had weathered storms. "You had a right," she replied sharply, "but you gave it up the day you walked away. Blood alone doesn't make you a father. Presence does. Sacrifice does, love does, and she already has someone who gives her that every single day." Her words echoed like thunder, and for the first time, Adil seemed to grasp the finality in her tone. But his desperation turned reckless. He raised his voice, insisting, "You can't erase me from her life. I will go to court if I have to." Aisha's heart raced, fear tightening its grip around her chest, but she refused to let it show. Instead, she calmly replied, "Do what you must, Adil, but know this. You will never win her love because love is not forced. She does not know you. You are a stranger to her, and that will never change." With that, she walked away, leaving him standing in the rain, defeated but not entirely gone. That evening, Aisha told Hamza everything. For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Then Hamza stood up, his face calm but his voice carrying an edge of steel. "Enough is enough. He has crossed every boundary. This is not about you alone anymore. It's about protecting the life we've built together. And if he thinks he can shake it, he's mistaken." For the first time, Aisha allowed herself to cry in his arms, not from weakness, but from the release of years of holding everything alone. In that moment, she realized she did not just have an ally in Hamza, she had a partner, a protector, and perhaps something even greater, a man who loved her with a sincerity that went beyond words. The following week, with Hamza's encouragement, Aisha met with a lawyer to understand her rights. The process was exhausting, but it also gave her clarity. Legally and emotionally, Adil had no claim to her daughter. He had abandoned his responsibilities long ago, and no court would favor a man who had vanished during the most critical years of a child's life. For Aisha, this was not only about defending her child, It was about taking ownership of her own strength, her own choices, and finally burying the past that had haunted her for so long. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Aisha sat on the balcony with her daughter asleep inside and Hamza beside her. She felt the cool breeze brush against her face, and for the first time in years she felt a genuine sense of peace. Hamza broke the silence gently. "You know, Aisha, when I first met you, I admired your strength. But now I realize it's not just strength. It's grace, it's courage, and it's love. You've carried so much alone, but you don't have to anymore. If you'll let me, I want to stand with you, not just as support, but as family." His words filled her heart with an emotion she had long suppressed. She looked at him, her eyes brimming with tears, not of sadness, but of gratitude. For years she had feared opening her heart again, fearing betrayal, fearing abandonment. But here was a man who had proven time and again that love was not about grand promises, it was about consistent presence, quiet strength, and unwavering loyalty. In that moment, Aisha realized something profound. The past had shaped her, but it no longer defined her. The man who had left her had no power over her future. She had built a life with dignity, raised her daughter with courage, and found love in a place she never expected. Looking at Hamza, she whispered, "You already are family." And so, with the setting sun painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Aisha finally closed the chapter on her past. Adil's shadow faded into the distance, powerless against the strength she had found in herself and in the love she now embraced. The future stretched before her like an open horizon, not easy, not perfect, but hers to shape. With her daughter's laughter as the anchor and Hamza's steady presence as the light guiding her way,